Good day, Grangers.
Welcome to the Hall. Today on our episode, we are going to be talking to Richard Stonebraker, who is the president of the Maryland State Grange and a board member of the National Grange Foundation. So, Richard, I want you to tell me about your local Grange and tell me about your history when you joined the Grange.
All right. Well, thank you all for having me. So I joined the Grange in 2004, and I was a member of my high school's FFA chapter. And as many subordinate or local Granges, they support their local 4-H and FFA chapters. Our Grange did that. Came to the Grange, presented on the parliamentary procedure team, and I liked what I saw at the Grange meeting. Everybody was friendly and welcoming, but we were able to stay and watch their meeting happen as well. And that's where I saw the alignment between Grange and FFA, unknowing the history of Grange and FFA at the time. And it was something that resonated with me, and I went home and both my parents were there, but I told them, hey, we're joining the Grange. And I joined and made my parents join with me. So it wasn't a heritage thing. It was, I'm doing this and you're doing it with me. And they did, and we have been Grange members for 20 years.
That's amazing. So you were the catalyst to get your family started.
I was the catalyst. It was
It's backwards from almost every story you hear about.
Yeah.
It's a unique story because normally it's you grow up in Grange, or your parents are part of it, your grandparents, and for my family it was totally opposite. And both of my parents have served the local Grange in officer positions. My mom, now that I'm the state president of Maryland, my mom is our community service director. So it's been this thing where we Grange together as a family. And now my partner, who had no idea what Grange is, it's like typical, well, you marry into the Grange, and now he's just as involved as my parents were.
That's amazing.
So it's been very fun.
The phrase "we Grange together" just really hit me in the face. As a slogan almost. But it's not just about families, it's about your Grange, the things that you do as a group. Mm-hmm. We Grange together. We are in this together.
Yeah.
I think personally, I'm going to contradict myself here. I hear a lot of I statements in the Grange. Yeah. I do this, I do that. Mm-hmm. And hearing the we do this together.
Well, and it's it goes back to, with me being a high school teacher and, the no I in team, I'm like, there's no I in Grange. It's true. It's we. If we're not doing it together, then we're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And we're not moving forward.
It's interesting that you came to the Grange through FFA. Mm-hmm. FFA introduced you, and now you're a high school ag teacher. And I know that you're introducing your FFA students to the Grange. Yeah. How does that, Simba, your circling of life there, how does that feel?
It's a very humbling experience because I knew, how much FFA did for me, but also how much Grange did, mm-hmm. and, that continuance past the high school level. And, getting to have students that get to experience that, sometimes it's a headache because it's trying to navigate the, getting them there and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. But it is, at the end of the day, it's always so rewarding. And, for us, it has been a blessing because our local Grange, or Newmarket Grange, we have.
Okay, so say that again.
Newmarket Grange 362.
I was like, he's got to say the number. Yep. So this is a Grangeism, and I will tell you, being new to the Grange, I did not realize you had to say the number when you said your Grange.
Because some states have multiple. Newmarket is. There's only one Newmarket Grange.
I understand, but it's just funny because when I went to my first state convention this past year, I was like, oh, okay, I see people getting up to the mic and like they're saying like all this stuff, and I was like, oh, I gotta write it down, and then I had to like, what is my Grange number?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
This is so simple.
it is so simple. Anyway, Waller Road number 1111.
Penns Valley number 158,
Yeah.
and Eagle Grange number 1.
And there you
But
go.
there we go.
Okay, anyway, sorry. Back to you.
You're very true though, but we, we can't run our food booth without our FFA members.
Let's
and
talk about
support.
that. Tell me about your food booth.
So we, the food booth for Newmarket Grange has been at the Great Frederick Fair, which is our county fair.
Okay.
We just had our 94th year on the fairgrounds.
We as in Newmarket Grange, or we as in the Great Frederick Fair?
Newmarket Grange.
Okay.
They've had
I
a
had
food
to-
booth on the fairgrounds for 94
Awesome.
years.
Wow.
And what the mindset was when it started, and still today, is the Grange food booth is there to provide reasonable prices for all attendees of the fair, but really for the 4-H and FFA members that are there showing, because our fair's a 9-day fair.
Yeah.
You've got youngsters that are there for the whole 9 days.
Mm-hmm.
When you're spending $20 or more at a meal,
Yeah.
Every time.
It
right?
adds up.
And they've already put so much money into their projects, so we keep our prices low and reasonable. This year we had a very successful year. Some years we don't.
Right.
Depends on weather and things like that. But we are open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night, which is a very long day.
And is this a fundraiser for your Grange? Is that
It
part
is.
of okay? Okay.
It is our biggest.
It's the fundraiser for your Grange. Okay.
We do other ones as well, but this is like the biggest. And so
And what's funny, I'm sure, is that you earn the money.
it goes
from
right back to the community.
Yeah, and you get it from the 4-H and FFA
Yep,
families
and
who
that's
are
who
in
it's
the barn
going.
area, and I'm sure that you turn it right back
Yep.
to them. So there's no money lost, but it's a feeling of goodwill between these three
Absolutely.
prominent ag organizations.
Yeah.
Well, and it has created this wonderful relationship because when I joined Newmarket, we only supported one FFA chapter.
Okay.
But with changing populations, as redistricting happened and more communities started to pop up around us, we're up to 4 FFA chapters
Wow.
that we support because there's no Grange in their areas to support them. One of them being the high school that I teach at, Frederick High, which is in the city.
Yeah.
And so they're helping us out, but then the money goes right back into them, and it's even extended over to not just supporting the FFA chapters of those schools, but we're now supporting the high schools Safe and Sanes for the graduating seniors. We're donating to them because their school is one that we touch, and we were like, while we know and understand, and value the relationship between FFAs and stuff, we also don't want to live in that vacuum. We want to support the school,
Right.
because they're
Right.
part of the community.
Absolutely.
And so, but yes, long fair days, they come in, they work the window, they take orders, because of the
When you say they, do you mean your
Just,
Grange members or
students.
Students.
Our
Okay.
students from FFA. Grange members are on the window usually too, but for the most part, we're back.
in the kitchen?
Right, because
As Grange members
Yes.
tend to be.
well,
kitchen.
and because we have the French fry, the big fryers, the grills, and
Yeah.
the
You
whole
can't put,
age.
are you saying
right?
you can't do 16, 17, 18-year-olds?
Right, no, when I was a 10-year-old in 4-H, I was definitely on the fry. I mean, we think nothing's are different.
We would love to, but the building, the food booth building, which the Grange built, it's a cinder block building.
Mhm.
It's one of only a small. I could count on one hand how many permanent buildings are on the fairgrounds that were built by organizations, and we're one of the only nonprofits. I think we are actually the only nonprofit left that has its building.
So that's awesome.
But it's very teeny tiny. I mean, you get a lot of people in there, which is great for help, but then you're bumping into each other and you're spilling things. So this year was a very fun experience because we had to do a whole new flight plan, so to speak. So nobody was getting run over.
And if I know Grangers, not that Grangers, people in general, I'll say, we're touchy about flight plans. Like the layout of well, we're going to send food this direction.
Oh, yeah.
Makes a big difference to people.
Oh, absolutely.
I have to give kudos to my Grange because this year was the first year we started to accept credit and debit cards.
Woo!
Nice.
Moving into the 21st century.
Now that we're a quarter way through it.
Right.
I thought I was like, oh boy, the heartburn over it, but.
Figuring out taxes and that kind of
right,
stuff.
Yeah.
That'll come later,
the whole
but-
figuring, but it was once everything started happening, the fair and all of them embraced it with open arms,
That's
and that's
these
what
days.
right.
Yeah.
since I've always been active since I joined, because I've always had a big mouth. So
Interesting how that happens,
right, but I'm like, we have to try. We can't be afraid of change, and we
writing that down.
We
Can't be afraid of change.
we can't be afraid to try it, and if you try it and it fails, that's okay. But then go back and be like, why did it fail? What could we, it's the whole review process.
In the theater industry, we call that a postmortem.
Right, postmortem.
Which is, it's a little morbid, but
that is very
you
morbid.
You bring down the show, the show is ended,
it's dead.
and it's dead.
It's dead.
You take a couple weeks and you go, okay, let's sit around and have a plan. And it's something that I think, for me as a communications director and a communication plan for your Grange and a marketing plan, it didn't work. Why not?
Right.
Or what can we do differently?
Okay, so I'm going to ask a hard question here.
Do it.
So I feel like, being someone who's new in the Grange, I want to hear your perspective as somebody who's been in the Grange for a while. How easily is our minds moved and changed in the Grange, and what do we need to do to make that to be able to go through this process of it worked, it didn't work, here's what we can do better, that sort of thing? Because I think, and this is just my perspective, and I'm giving my opinion, I hear a lot of, that's how we've always done it. Right. But I hear a lot of that. And so as a leader, as a young leader, within your local and state and, national Grange, how do we, as a Grange family, because we are a family, how do we
Thank you, Sister Sledge.
That's right. How do we move beyond? How do we do better? And if you have examples from your own experiences, I'd love to hear.
It's one of those things where I wish that I had a magic wand that we could just wave it and it would all be taken care of. Because I've heard it for the 20 years that I've been a member as well. We've always done it this way, and the thing that I try to remember, because when I explain something to someone in Grange or whatever, I try to approach it not from we've always done it that way, but in the past it's been done this way, but we can do this. And I've caught myself saying, well, we've always done it that way, and then it's like, wake up, Richard, like you're falling into that. But I catch myself before something, action comes out of it. And I'm like, okay, well, if we've always done it that way, but that doesn't mean it can't be changed.
Right.
Or it can't be interpreted. And
I love language like that. It's like, let's change things.
Well,
but not
change for progress sake.
Right, and not just change for the sake of change.
Right,
because I think sometimes, and not to interject, but I think sometimes, especially when you're new and maybe a little more progressive thinking, people will automatically throw up that wall in front of you and say, you just want to change because you don't understand, right?
And there are those people that join or that are, coming in. But I think for all three of us sitting at this table, we're all on the younger spectrum of Grange members, and we are all leaders in our local Granges, but we're all also in a place where we are okay with questioning why we've done it.
Yeah.
And we are trying to help our members understand, and like listening to you, like with credit cards, and understand that there are easier ways and better ways to
but also
reach
knowing
the
that that's a
community.
universal issue, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's a universal
I mean,
issue, not just amongst Grange, but like
No.
nonprofits in general, and like how do you move into the next thing,
Right.
and not just progress for progress sake, but progress for like how do we actually make people's lives easier?
you have to meet the community where they are.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
In the case of the fair, we're not a cash-based community for the large portion anymore.
Yeah.
So everybody has a credit card or a debit card in their wallet that they can tap and go, and that's what they want. So if we're meeting them in the convenience age, if we want to call it that,
Yeah.
then we have to say for us to progress, we have to.
I'm also writing that down. Convenience
I'm
age.
a phrase maker.
Yeah. That's great.
But we have to meet them
Yeah.
where they are
Yeah.
rather than making things harder on them to come to us.
Right.
And I think that's in Grange in general.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Well, and I also think, knowledge is power. And one of the things that I look from the inside of the Grange perspective is, and how many people know the digestive laws? How many of Grange members know
So people who don't,
parliamentary?
let's stop really quick. Because my hope is that at some point someone who is not immersed in Grange is going to be listening to this
Absolutely.
podcast.
Absolutely.
Explain what the digestive laws is. Or briefly, I'm
So,
sorry, that's
well,
a long explanation,
you know,
but briefly.
Basically, what I've, because I've had the same question, my students ask me, well, what is the digestive law? And I'm like, it's basically our rule book. If you're in sports, think of the rule book, and
I mean, are these rules about how to live my life? Or are these rules about...
no, it's so like the structure of Grange,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
how we conduct our meetings?
right?
Okay.
Parliamentary things, and there are things that I'm still learning, especially in my new role as state president.
Right.
Of what can be done, what can't be done, what interpretations there are, but
What's not written down that
right,
you
right.
don't know.
And the thing, having been a young person that, like I said, had a big mouth, using that knowledge allowed us, I think when I joined Newmarket, they were like, holy crap, we've got someone that's actually going to stand up and voice an opinion, and do these things. And so having that knowledge is like, okay, well, I'm going to make this motion, and I'm going to, have my reasons lined up,
Right.
and not that you're trying to persuade someone, but you can use that to create the change that you want to see. And now as a state president, I've already issued my first presidential ruling for the state of Maryland.
Okay.
And, that was to help.
I've been president as long as we've been here.
Longer, thank you.
Richard is a fast mover.
You know what? And we need more of those.
Light speed, yes.
Well, and it's not, they're like, well, he's the young gun and he's doing this and that. And we have to keep ourselves moving forward. We have to keep Grange relevant, and we all have to be on the same page, which is also hard to get everyone on the same page. But there's one thing that stands out in my mind that I always think back to. It was a Grange member, a youth member at Newmarket, and they had an idea for something, I don't remember what it was, a fundraiser or some activity, and they, stood up to talk about it and, put it out there, and their own grandfather shot it down and said, we're not going to do that. We've never done that before. It's impossible, And from that moment, that individual never came back.
Oh.
It's a familiar tale.
Yep. And that that has always stuck with me, because especially, this morning here at National Session, watching the youth and juniors come in, and we are all so quick to say it, well, that's our future. But I think sometimes it's just words that are being said now. Like, are you thinking about it? Because people, you're quick to say it, and then no one. I'm like, that is our future,
Right.
folks.
Yes.
I mean, at some point, I know that I'm going to be gone,
Right.
and the youth and juniors have to be so. They're carrying it on, and I'm like, as silly as whatever they may come up with, entertain it.
Right.
Talk about it.
Right.
Make them feel valued and connected. And that's any person that comes through.
Absolutely.
Right.
Is, I have seen countless times where we've had someone as a member for a little while, and the minute they propose an idea or something, and it's not even entertained, they're gone. Because people are looking for an outlet to be heard.
Right.
So do you, and this is probably potentially controversial, do you allow non-members in your meetings to voice an opinion?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
And,
Is that unusual?
It's very unusual.
I guess
It is.
I'm gonna pose the I don't know question because I don't know.
Yeah, certainly.
And I guess because there are people who come to our meetings that are non-members, but they generally don't speak up. So I never even thought about whether we would allow them to speak or not. So
I've been in meetings where a non-member has started talking and
someone has
the
shushed them.
president says, "I'm sorry, you're not a member. You don't
No.
have
Okay.
you don't have a voice
And-
in this order," which. By the digest, if you're going by our
correct.
digest,
Okay.
it's correct. But I think from a community standpoint, if we want to encourage membership in general, or even just participation,
Right.
shouldn't we listen to the community that we're serving? So if you have a community member coming in,
Well,
sorry I took over that conversation.
But
No.
no, you're 100% right, because I serve as president at Newmarket, and I'm like, this Grange is to serve the community.
Mm-hmm.
How are we going to make a decision on something if we're not involving the community in
Absolutely,
it?
absolutely.
If you live in a silo, in a vacuum, and we have had so Newmarket this year, we took in 10 new members.
Awesome.
We had a
I was going to
net
ask.
gain of 10.
You went there. I didn't have to
Yeah.
go there. That's great. I was going to ask.
We
So
had
how do we bring in new members?
We had a net gain of 10,
That's
and
fabulous.
some of it stemmed from the fact that we had community members come to the Grange meetings when there was something, that they heard through the grapevine, or they saw on our Facebooks and social media. Also very important,
Yeah.
because we talk about what's coming up in our meetings.
Oh, that's smart.
But they came, and they were able to add to the discussions and be part of it, and once again have their voice heard, and then they join.
Love that.
Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, Phil.
Well, I was going to say, in general, and I said this yesterday in a workshop, that I would rather have members of the community who are not members of the Grange helping us with our things than 1 or 10 people who only pay their dues and never show up and never voice their
Absolutely
opinions.
right.
And I think that as the Grange, we need to be more accepting and welcoming of outside voices in our work.
Yep.
And so to see it in action is a fantastic opportunity for other Granges to model and to say, why can't we be that voice for our community and let the community in? If we're going to say that we are the voice for rural America, which has been bandied around a lot this week, then let's do that. Let's let rural America have their say through us.
Absolutely.
And okay, so new topic. What projects, so you talked about community members coming in because of projects or events. What has been successful and worked for you?
Well, we are very fortunate at Newmarket that we're on a 4-acre lot, and
It's beautiful.
You've been to Newmarket,
And let's also just say, again, because there might be non-Grangers listening to this, some Granges are in halls,
Correct.
have buildings. Some Granges have buildings but don't own the land in which they sit. And then some Granges, like yours and mine, have halls and land.
And I do also want to point out, so Newmarket's in Newmarket, Maryland, which is essentially a suburb of Frederick.
Right.
So,
Right.
Okay.
so it's
We're
not
even
necessarily rural. Yeah. So
It's okay, I don't belong to a rural Grange.
I know. I know. No, that's what I'm saying. I'm like we're saying that we're the voice of rural America, but we're not
And
strictly rural.
right,
So.
right.
But I think the distinction is, I mean, I know we're like on a, bunny trail right now, but like the distinction is that like in my community, even though it's suburban, it is not in a incorporated part of a city. So we don't have another community center / organization where we can all be in together. So that is what the Grange is. Because historically it was rural, but it's not anymore because the city has grown.
Well,
so.
or for Waller Road, you mean?
Yeah.
Like, it was a rural part of the community.
That's what I'm saying. At one point it was rural, but no longer are we rural. I mean, we're like really East Tacoma for people from that part of the state or my part of the state. They'll understand.
Well, and we, Newmarket lucked out because our original hall is diagonally across from our current hall, which the original hall was built 1924.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this. I wanted to hear about this.
So Newmarket was chartered. Well, Newmarket was originally chartered in 1874, but it only lasted for 1 year. And then
that happened a lot.
Okay. Oh, that's new. Okay, so that's totally news to me.
Yeah.
What happened? Like, why would that happen?
Granges would pop up because historically, the goal in the early days of the Grange was to open as many Granges as possible.
Oh, like Starbucks. It's the Starbucks.
It was a Starbucks.
That's awesome.
It was the Starbucks of the 1870s. Was the Grange.
Yeah.
Writing that down.
So historically, these deputies would be sent out to organize Granges, and the
Market
members.
saturation. I love it.
Yeah, but the members weren't ready for it.
You're right.
So they were opened and left to their own devices, and the deputies and the founders of the Grange couldn't keep up with as fast as these Granges were coming together.
Interesting. Okay.
So, and back then, rural free delivery wasn't a thing.
Right.
So, because the Grange did that several years later.
Yes.
So the communication lines weren't open and
Interesting.
not as easy to navigate.
Yeah.
So these Granges would open, and that's why some Granges are in the 2100s as far as the numbers, because every time a Grange closes and then recharters, often a new number is issued.
Interesting.
And so the numbers just keep growing progressively. So like
They
Pennsylvania,
don't get their original number back.
Sometimes they do.
If they're reorganized.
Then you can either reorganize or recharter, which is a whole other conversation.
Dizzying. Dizzying.
But like Pennsylvania, for instance, our newest Grange number I think is 2112.
Okay.
Those 2100 Granges have never been opened at the same time.
Right. So it's not like there are currently over 2100 Granges.
So like even by the time our state Grange was founded in Pennsylvania, for instance, some of the first 25 Granges had already closed.
Okay. So originally it was open for a year, and then it closed. And we're not going to harp on this, but I just
closed. It didn't reorganize until, well, wasn't even reorganized because they were assigned a new number. So it was, organized.
Rechartered, or chartered again.
1920. 24, they built their first hall, which was
in 24.
1924. Yeah.
So interesting.
Which was beautiful. It was a beautiful hall.
By the time this podcast comes out, it will be 100 years ago.
That's true.
Happy 100th anniversary.
That's right.
Oh, well, we're hitting January 13th. We're 104.
Happy 104th anniversary.
Yeah. Thank you.
How do you do the math on that?
Well, 1920.
Oh, I thought you said 1924.
That's when the hall was built.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We were chartered in 1920.
Apologies to everyone in the podcast universe.
Math is not Meagan's strong suit.
That's why I say I'm an ag teacher. I'm not a math teacher.
Yeah, me neither.
So that hall was a beautiful hall, but literally you walked out the door, or if you hung put your arm out the window on the side, you were off the property line on both sides. So it was literally the building built on this tiny sliver, and it served its purpose for 1924 to 1957-ish, around there. And there was this 4 acres of land right across the road, and it was voted to purchase it, sell the hall, and build a new hall. And so that's, that was one of the first steps among many, but like in my mind, the biggest one for Newmarket really positioning itself to serve the community. And then we just sat there on 4 acres. And so when I joined, it was like, why are we, first of all, we're off the main road. So we're, kind of hit Main Street is in the front of us, but we're behind a couple buildings, blah, blah,
what,
right,
I-80?
70 right
you.
behind us. And so I'm like, if we're not doing something to invite people back here, then we're still getting out, falling out of the mind of folks. So at the start of the pandemic, well, literally right before the pandemic hit, because nobody knew this was coming.
Right.
I had put out. I went because it was my idea. It was my baby that I took on my project, and that's what usually I say we, but I say I for this one because it was my baby.
I know what.
And they, but I put a herb garden in, little planter boxes, and put it out there to the community that this is open to the community. Come pick what you would like.
Oh, very cool.
The only request was that if you come back and pick herbs, please pull some weeds while you're there. Because nobody's there to take care of
that seems fair. Seems fair.
And then the pandemic hit, and people were coming back left and right to visit that herb garden for cooking, because all of the change that popped up during the pandemic. And so
Anybody else make sourdough?
Yeah.
You were never a sourdough?
No.
Oh well, sorry.
Fresh
Even
herbs
before,
and
Before you were not a bread lover.
No, I love bread, but
Not
I don't cook it. I don't make it.
Yeah.
But everybody had a sourdough phase during the pandemic.
Not me.
What was your sourdough phase then?
Honestly, I don't know what I did. I had little kids. So first of all,
That's true.
I had a
Sorry.
baby. Just so everybody in the podcast world knows, I had a baby in January of 2020. So the day that I was supposed to go back to work from maternity leave was the day they sent everyone home for COVID.
Okay.
So that's what I did during my baby. My youngest was my sourdough phase during the. I'm sorry, Malcolm. I love you.
Your mom just called you sourdough.
You were my bread loaf.
Back to herbs.
But so it was one of those you recognize, and it's like, oh, maybe we should put some seeding out. We have 4 acres. We have some beautiful trees on the property. People needed a place to just go, and even though we're right next to I-70, the tree row in the back blocks it. People just want to go have a place to sit outside.
Yeah.
And so things from that started to stem, and then we had an idea of there's no place to really grow stuff. So we put a community garden in.
Awesome.
And when we started to put that idea out there, we had a lot of community members start coming in to find out about this community, how was it going to be handled, and what was going to happen, and we gained several members from that.
Yeah.
We gained several members from the fact that we put a pollinator garden in, and then we had a few a fellow in town that I've known ever since my family moved to Newmarket, who was a furniture repairer, and he has a cabinet shop and different things, that he saw us doing the benches and then offered to make several more benches, or to take the ones that have been sitting outside for a while that the weather takes a beating, to refinish them, reseal them, and so now he's a member.
Yeah.
But he came and said, look, I won't be able to make every meeting. And I think that's one of the things, too, that we have to realize is we are in a society now that even whether a Grange meets twice a month or once a month, you're not going to see every member every single time.
And that's right. And so I think this is the mentality shift of probably younger to, the older generation within the Grange, is that with especially like young people, young families, that sort of thing, there's 100 other things going on, right? And so I think, to me, like the shift in mentality of like, we're gonna take people as they are, as they come, right? I talk about this in my own Grange all the time. It's like, if you want to volunteer at one event a year and that's all you're gonna ever do, I am happy to have you at my one event a year. And if that's the only time I see you, awesome. Right. Thank you so much for coming. And if you're at every meeting and every time the Grange Hall is open, you're sitting in the you're sitting in the seats, and that's great too. But how do we make that shift from people where this was literally their entire lives, which I understand.
It was the big social circle.
Right.
And in some communities that was it.
Yeah.
The Grange was all they had.
You had a Grange Hall and a church.
That's right. And it's like, and so how do we make that? How do we do better? I mean, I guess that's like, let's go there. Like, how do we do better about accepting people where they're at? and allowing them to be apart without dictating how they are apart.
And you know, again, it's like I wish there was that magic wand to fix that. But it's a mindset shift that you know, we wondered why Grange has, even though we had a second year of membership growth.
Yes. Woohoo!
But why?
Woohoo.
Well, when other fraternal organizations are dying off and closing left and right,
let's
Grange
not
is...
pass over that. Yes. 2 years of membership growth is a big deal.
Yes.
And you know, you have to keep in mind that what was is not what is now.
Right.
I'm just going to go right off of that and say, lead us into the future.
Yes.
So you.
So that is really, I mean, I think, and I think that, you know, in thinking about this podcast and what we want from it, we really want to talk. And
this is our first ever recording.
Yeah, this is true.
Surprise.
On the first.
Surprise.
Cut that out.
But I think
No.
This all.
The goal of this whole podcast is there's as little editing as possible.
It's gonna all go in.
This is.
Yeah,
raw.
but what I was going to say is I really...
This is Grange.
It is Grange. And I really want to hear what, as a young leader, like, let's just take away the young, because I think, like, let's not, you know, preface that with anything. As a leader in the organization, you are young, because I think you're younger than me. But
he's younger than me.
Yeah, yes, you're younger than me. So I'm the old lady in the room, guys. Hello. How do we move into the future? Because I want to say, too, we're talking about membership growth. The membership growth in the Grange has been amongst youth.
Yes.
It has been amongst youth, which is amazing. But how do we keep those people... How do we continue to bring those people in, and how do we keep those people interested in what's going on when they run up against the roadblocks that we know are still present within, you know, the current Grange?
It's how are we adding the value back into Grange? You know, everyone saw value in Grange, and they still do. We haven't asked that question at all this week, have we? But how are we adding? Because we have to, you know, the thing is, we have to realize that. I said it before. What was is not what is.
Yeah.
And so, how are we going to add the value back? You know, the youth that we have in our Grange at Newmarket, one, valuing their opinions, making them feel heard and seen, but then also if they go away to college, if they, you know, even if they move away, because as Grange we have the memberships, the different levels that even when they move, we still send them little notes and little letters as long as we have, you know, an email address and something as simple as checking in, because I used to hear, well, they don't talk to us anymore, and you know, there's no communication.
Let me ask you, who does that within your Grange? What? I mean,
there's a group of us. There is a committee. And it's a sunshine committee, which usually, you know, historically.
Is that a thing?
In their Grange. I only know because of that.
Okay, because I'm like, what is the sunshine committee?
So the sunshine committee is like if there's a member, if a baby, they have a baby, you know, graduation.
Okay, so in my Grange, our chaplain does that.
Okay. Mine, it's the secretary.
Right. Interesting.
Well, I'd say
that's so interesting. I didn't realize that wasn't just the way the Grange. Okay, I'm learning.
I mean, that is the beauty of Grange, is that there is that individuality that you know, but we have the committee that does it, and you know, Grange members always, we have this fun network of finding out what is happening and you know, so that this can be done. But my point was, okay, well, communication's a two-way street. The minute we stop communicating,
right,
we fade into the background, and it's no longer a priority or even a thought of said person.
Okay.
And you know, I've seen, because I served as the Maryland State Grange Youth Director from 2006 to 2014-15. And I was a youth myself, but here I was as the youth director, and you know, I saw so many of the kids that came through the program or came through Grange that they're no longer connected anymore.
Right.
They're gone. And the hard part is, once someone replaces the piece of Grange that's in their equation, you're not getting it back.
Right. So you mean like the part of their life,
Right? That
is
part of their
Grange.
life.
Yeah.
Right.
So like whether that's
You
like
know,
friendship or
and
hobbies,
or
yeah,
anything
whatever
like that.
that is to
Interesting.
them, yeah.
Very interesting.
and that's where my mind went to, even if they're not always at a meeting. Like I said, we've had ones that moved away for college or just plain moved away to a different state, but they still want to be a Grange member because they remember their time in Newmarket. And sometimes, I'll get, because I have access to our email list, or the email.
As you should, as president.
Well, but you'll get little notes back from people that were members that we as our Grange started to age, some folks are now snowbirds in Florida, but we still get correspondence back and forth from them. And when they're in town or home visiting and a Grange meeting's happening, they pop in.
Right.
Or an event.
So how do you keep? So I just want to flesh this out a little bit more. You're talking about like using things like social media and maybe like email, email service, that sort of thing, in order to maintain that communication, even when people aren't aren't as active as
still keeps them part of the community.
Absolutely.
Right. And I'll say, I just want to give a shout out to the Grange for being progressive in that we allowed digital attendance, virtual attendance at our meetings.
Yeah.
Starting in it was a presidential ruling in 2019, and happened to be before the pandemic that allowed Zoom to be used in your meeting hall.
Yeah.
So
That's
your members,
so cool. I didn't know that.
your members have a vote and a voice, even when they can't be there in person.
Yep.
So that, and we've been encouraging. I've been trying as communications director to encourage community Granges to adopt that.
Yep.
There is the problem, of course, many Granges are in rural areas, don't have access to Wi-Fi, broadband.
Right.
We've been working on that too.
Right.
But it does allow a way for your members to still have their voice and feel a part of that community.
Our Grange Hall does not have internet. Now we can have internet access, but we don't have it.
I'm sorry, what?
That's
I am attached to my phone.
Well, but I mean, like 4G works there. But,
Yeah.
I understand.
But it's a
Maybe not
topic
5G.
that
There's things you
we've
can't
been
do if you're not on
discussing.
Wi-Fi. No, I'm kidding.
But we have had meetings where folks are not able to attend, or they're either traveling, but they're connected. They want to stay connected, and so yes, I've pulled out my phone and plopped it up on. Please nobody yell at me for this, but plopped it up on the altar next to the Bible because it's in the center of the room.
It's in the center of the room.
We don't have a tripod, but
as long as you're not walking in and out during.
I honestly, so I was in Minnesota State Grange session the other week, and they zoomed a couple things, and they have like it's the owl zoom.
So it's like a
So and they said it right in front of the vice president's station. But it was a 360 view, so you could see every member in the room.
That's
so
very
everybody who was
cool.
tuning in virtually, it was really neat, and that was something for me. I was like, I learned something today.
We're trying to look into the 360 cameras because we used them during the pandemic for teaching.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, of course.
Me being a horticulture teacher, like out in the greenhouse, I put a 360 camera out there because we had literally just started planting stuff, and then boom,
go home, kids.
That's right.
So they could watch and see and use that, and so I'm like that. It's a great tool to have for things like that, so people are there. But it goes back to one, you have to have someone that's open-minded enough to say, hey, we need to do this.
Right.
You need someone that, or more than someone, everyone needs to be connected to plug in and keep it going. Like commit to it.
Absolutely.
Commit to doing this. And at our meetings, every at the end, or when I send out a communication with the secretary, we always say, if you're not going to be able to make it, or if you would like to be zoomed in, or we even use FaceTime because some folks have the iPhone.
Right.
I sound like an old person. The iPhone.
The iPhone.
Sorry, a seasoned person. But
mature.
But you have to look at every facet and
Yeah.
have those people connected to keep it going
Yeah.
and make it work. I think one of the things is we put up a lot of resistance sometimes, like, oh my gosh, it's going to be too hard to do that, and that it's that mental roadblock.
How do
that
we
you gotta
adopt
get
a
over.
more let's just try it attitude?
Well, it's like, look at years ago when we adopted the whip Justy. I'd be delighted.
But exactly.
Why aren't we adopting?
Do you know I'd be delighted?
No.
Okay,
I mean, I
so-
hear people say it.
It's a common phrase from the first youth director of the National Grange.
Okay.
Was I'd be delighted. And so when you ask somebody to do something, even though they may say begrudgingly,
I'd be
I'd
delighted.
be delighted.
Okay. Is that like bless your heart in
but-
Texas?
but
Maybe.
there are times.
I think it depends on the grade.
But the person, yeah.
And the person.
And the person. But yeah, no, it's why aren't we? That was a mentality that was
Right.
adopted. Why aren't we adopting?
Well, and I think
What's our catchphrase for the 21st century? Like what do we have now?
Yeah.
For me, it is just try it, see what happens.
Well,
Like,
I think another thing that we should be thinking about is what's next. I think we should be thinking about what's
Absolutely.
next. And I think that, and this is my final question to you, is like, where do we see the
Mhm.
Grange in 15, 20, I mean, like, we could even go as far as 50, who knows if I'll be around in 50 years, but in 50 years, like, where do we see the Grange, and how do we stay relevant
Right.
in a world that is vastly connected right now? I mean, if you're not connected, you're ancient.
You're nobody.
Well, you're ancient.
Yeah,
You're not keeping up with it. So, like, how do we stay relevant, and where do you see the Grange? That's the question. Don't answer the how do we stay relevant, because that's a hard question. Answer the where do you see the Grange in 15, 20 years?
I've asked myself this question, and I'm like, I wish I had a very good, like, straightforward answer.
Yeah.
But I always go back to, no matter how you slice Grange, past, present, future, we are there to serve the communities that were found. And, in the years to come, that's where we're going to be, and we have to be. We need to be and stay there because, and I hate to say it, but that's what we are, and that's going to lead us into the future, because if we're not serving a purpose, our communities, and that, when I say serving our communities, that means with the grassroots legislation, advocacy, all of the things that we're known for is, if I could bundle it all into a nice little box and tie a bow, it's the community.
Right.
And if we're not focusing on that, then we're not going to go anywheres. But, I certainly hope that in 10, 15 years, because the question that the fellows asked, where do you see Grange in 50 years? And I had to be candid. I said, I'm going to be honest for 1 second and be like, I hope the Grange is still around in 50 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, yes. I think that's why we're starting a podcast, because we want the Grange to be around in 50 years, and we want people to understand it inside and outside of the Grange, both what Grange is and why it's so important. Because I think, and what I think you're saying, and I think I'm just going to reiterate, is that it is the heart of many communities, and some of those communities unfortunately are aging and maybe pittering out a little bit, but like there's a lot of communities that are still growing, and the Grange can be a vital part of those communities as a center. And I just think, I think that,
well, and it's one of those things too, we had this happen at Newmarket. You come to the hall, you have your meeting, you leave the hall. You stay in that vacuum for, part of it. And it's, if you're not connecting to your community or the communities around you, us going to, now taking on donating to these schools that have the FFAs, I'm like, we're broadening the reach of the communities that we're in.
Absolutely.
But if we kept ourselves in a silo or in a little tiny vacuum, we're not going to be around. And we know that we are no longer in a rural area.
right.
We're suburban, but when we go and deal with the high school, Frederick High, where I teach, that's a city setting. And so we had to, we have to look at the wide gamut of it, because we do cover some spots that are a little rural, mostly suburban, but also cities, and being prepared to connect to those communities.
You do have another Grange that's not too terribly far from you. Like, isn't Linganore?
Linganore is in more of a
rural area,
right?
Yeah.
And
but I think that's the really interesting perspective too of
Yeah.
being from, it can be what it is, right? And I think that's the other thing, that like a Grange can be what their community needs, what you've talked about.
But if you're not connected to your community, you're not going to know how to pivot, how to change, and serve them.
The one thing that I think we can encapsulate that in is that our founders, the people who formed the Grange, not just the 7 that we remember, but the first legacy builders of the Grange, believed in progress. That they knew from the beginning that we had to adapt to your community, and that every Grange needed to have a little spice, a little something that made them unique in their area. Like there are the common things that we do, there are the common things that make a Grange, and not a Lions Club, not a Kiwanis. Like, we're a little different in those respects, but then we can still pick and choose the projects and make our own agenda in our community to make that difference. Right. And I think so often we get stuck, and my Grange, we're guilty of it as well, where you get stuck in a loop of doing the same things over and over again, not realizing they're not serving a purpose anymore.
Right.
And we have to continually look at our programming at all levels of the Grange and say what's working, what's not working, how do we adapt, and what's next.
Yeah.
The moment you fail to adapt, the moment you fail to connect, is the moment you fail to exist.
I had a saying at our state convention, and it was "evolve or die." So, I
mean, that's a little more simply put.
It is a little more simply put, maybe a little harsh, but any closing thoughts, Richard, before we close this out for the day?
I just wish you all very much success with this, and I think it's going to be a great thing to have come out and people can listen to, and we all have stories like this to share, and that's the joy, the beauty of going to sessions and going to events, and when I say events, I mean Grange events and non-Grange events, because that's where you start to pick up all of what's happening, what's going on, that whole connected piece.
Right.
And this is going to be I think a very useful tool. That
the ideas that we can steal will make us all better.
Like,
coming here to hear what other people do.
Absolutely. And not everyone has the ability to come to, we are currently sitting in the middle of National Convention, just so everyone knows, we're sitting in the middle of National Convention. So not everyone has the ability to do that for whatever reason, be that work or financial or whatever the case might be.
Again, we are meeting our community where they are.
Absolutely. And so
thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, that's really the thought. The thought is that if we can share the ideas, make them more widespread, then this is going to be hopefully make us successful for years and years to come.
Absolutely.
So, Richard, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you next time at the hall.
The Grange Hall Podcast is a production of the National Grange, all rights reserved. If you have comments or questions, or if you'd like to recommend a member of your Grange to be featured, you can contact us at grangehallpod@gmail.com.